Welcome to week 7. This week we're going to talk about AI's use in design and branding. This is one of what I call the hot zones of AI because design and branding thrives on what? It thrives on revisions, thrives on iteration, doing version after version after version, which is the exact thing that generative AI is best at. And our goal is basically to find a way to use AI in design and branding to expand our options, but without losing human aesthetics and taste, and then also the brand integrity that's consistent across every element that the brand has. One of the things that you know AI excels at is the idea, like we mentioned, of mood exploration, generating hundreds of variations in seconds that might have taken a designer days to go ahead and create. So that's a big advantage. That gets you through the comps into the critique realm really quickly. So basically the workflow happens a lot faster. From a flexibility standpoint, again, it helps with designing for intent. And what I mean by that, we can adapt, we can personalize our layouts and content based on users' preferences. So that designing with intent, we're taking our design to even a more personal level, which can be very advantageous. Multiple modes, we think about that. Basically, all the AI design tools can use lots of different things. We can use text, image, video, audio, all into single platforms to allow rapid production of brand content for things like social media posts or ads on television. A great example of that was with the National Gas Metering Association in Britain. They had a project they had to create for a construction convention. And they wanted basically, the project was kind of a Where's Wally type of thing, but with a national gas metering engineer. And it's like where to find them in the graphics. So they wanted to create this interactive game at this convention. And this would take a long time to create. Normally it might take about, 120, 140 hours to go ahead and create this thing across the videos and illustrations that they had, but they used AI. They focused with Midjourney to start to create, instead of doing manual illustration, to create the work is much faster. You can see we have the engineers there on the left, then we have some of the different other people and other environments that they'd be having as well. So what would normally be, as I mentioned, 120 hours to create this, only took 20 hours. So that's an 83% reduction in production time. Company claimed it saved over $11,000. And here's the final versions of these. They did multiple ones. I'm just showing you 2 of them here. If you're looking for the engineer, he's in the kind of the top center on the left. He's right in the center in the right image. You can see him there. But they went through the process. They didn't accept the first image. They used AI to experiment with prompts and styles, and they moved, they wanted to make sure they incorporated their standard corporate look, and they went into more of an orange aesthetic. Still matched the brand identity, but it was more stylized, and it worked well. And once they landed on a style, then they used Adobe Photoshop's AI generative fill layer to expand layers and fix hallucinations or errors type of things. And eventually they were able to orchestrate a great output. So using Midjourney to create a lot of the elements, using Adobe Photoshop's AI generative fill to go ahead and expand layers, they're able to create something very quickly. Finally, though, because they had video as well, they had to use After Effects. So using Adobe After Effects to basically navigate the 3D cameras through the AI layers to change these static 2D images into 3D. So using the AI function in After Effects to be able to do that as well. And all this in 20 hours, which is very impressive. So what this means is this is a very big design shift between traditional design workflow and what AI enhanced workflow is. And we can look at it in 3 different categories. One is asset creation. Again, it would take illustrators or designers weeks of manual drawing to create a lot of things. And now we go through basically hours of prompts to be able to create the work that we want to do. So it happens faster. But that doesn't mean the designer isn't valuable. The designer is still valuable, but they have a different type of role. The designer is not production focused. They're not the maker. They become the conductor. So they become the curator, the refiner. They're trying to figure out what the best choice is, and they basically are still creating something. They're just not literally physically drawing, charcoal or illustrating something. From a brand integrity standpoint, AI is very helpful because in the past, what we're doing for brands, we're looking at our manual corporate identity guide. We're going through the pages and making sure this font's correct, this color's right, the right PMS color, things like that. Now, we can build all those brand DNA constraints into the prompt so that we're making sure we have instant brand integrity. So this idea for designers of being not the maker but the conductor is sometimes a hard transition for a lot of us because the role's changing, but it's still an incredibly valuable role because we're focusing on solving problems and navigating the trade-offs of aesthetics of what we're getting from AI. So we're basically going through a versioning process and a curation process that's really valuable versus manually assembling designs, throwing most of them in the trash can because they didn't work. So we're saving time. It really lets us get into that true creativity, I think, and curation process a lot faster. So that's valuable. And part of that is, again, that iteration loop. So again, we have basically the idea that AI generates a concept, then we go ahead and critique it. But another way to look at it is, I call it the battle of the AIs. You have one AI do the work, and you have another AI critique it, almost acting as a devil's advocate. So for example, if you had Midjourney create an image, and then basically you said, well, I don't like this, but I want the colors a little differently, and I want it more of a wireframe style. Instead of having Midjourney that, you give it to Nano Banana and see what they would do with it. And also offer whatever revisions as well. So you're basically pitting two AIs against one another, and sometimes the results can be much more powerful because they're going to have different aesthetics, different angles of how they process stuff. Real-time feedback is really important. Again, as you're designing something, you might have to think about it, or you have to wait for, what if there's anything you need to do it. AI gives you instant feedback. So it allows designers to prototype and reimagine work at speed and scale not achievable before. And because AI thrives on learning from the feedback loops, the results you'll get from AI get better over time. Clarity and consistency. Constraints, we've mentioned this more over and over again. You need to have constraints on any AI you're using. That's going to help you prevent the generic AI look. And everyone knows what that looks like now and everything. So it has that kind of vanilla feel to it. Designers must apply, when they're doing stuff for brands, a brand DNA constraints. And this can be lots of different things. This can be things like color palette, typography, imagery styles, and have that stuff pasted into the prompts to ensure that the AI outputs remain consistent with specific brand identity. Then you can have strategic constraints as well that basically say you never do a logo of that size or whatever. And they'll focus on that pattern matching capability towards really valuable directions. The important thing is to talk about brand DNA. Brand DNA is not just about making things look nice and consistent. It's really a strategy and how you want to make your identity visible in the way that you want. And it's important to establish those things up front. And I mentioned them on the slide before, but some of the things you want to establish in your brand identity, your brand DNA, logo, color palette, typography, any imagery, and any specific logo, layout, or design systems that you always have websites in a certain way, or you always have brochures or posters in a certain way. Establishing the brand identity can be adding those things that we just mentioned there, and a few other things as well. So beyond basically having the color palette, the typography and imagery rules, I'm a big believer in also adding at least 3 adjectives about what it should look like. So I think that kind of helps to constrain maybe a little bit more about what the AI should do with regard to a brand. So 3 adjectives, and I also add 2 don'ts. 2 don'ts being don't ever use fuchsia, or don't ever have a sans serif font, or whatever. Just something else to kind of help make sure they just restrain things a little bit. And that's in the brand DNA, but you also have other visual constraints that you can do that help fine tune it. It can be lots of different things. It can be things like shapes and forms. It can be like always have rounded corners on your shapes, or always use triangles as a geometric shape when having call-out sections, things like that. It can be layout and composition rules, like the amount of white space, the grids you're using, how brand elements relate to one another in 2D versus 3D space, all those different things. And then all these helps, but you can even also define rules to prevent this generic AI look. Being specific is always best. So I might not just say, have color palette of purple with, Helvetica font type of thing. I might say use the color purple, but never have pastel versions of it. Always using high contrast lighting from a higher source to be able to provide a little bit of a backdrop for it. You force the AI to iterate inside your identity when you define the rules. And then you make these repeatable prompts. When you establish your brand DNA and your visual constraints, you copy and paste them somewhere. And you paste them in every prompt to ensure consistency. That way you're always guaranteed, hopefully, you're going to get the same output. Example, and a really simple example here. IBM used Adobe Firefly for its Let's Create brand campaign. And it just gave them one visual. It gave them the visual of the question mark. And what Firefly did is they created 200 unique assets and over 1,000 marketing variations in minutes. That's pretty impressive. And then IBM used that question mark in some of their campaigns, and it generated 26 times higher engagement than their previous benchmarks and stuff. And this is just a question mark. Your brand obviously could be more of that, but this kind of an interesting way that it can be used. They rolled it out to their entire IBM, 20,000 people, to help them go ahead and use it for however they could use it using Adobe Express. So how they could incorporate this question mark into the work that they were doing, becoming a brand campaign. It's a really effective big rollout of brand DNA. Let's switch over to apps and websites, but AI and user experience or user interface is being done all the time. And it used to feel like if you were designing a user interface, you had to code. It was like being in a computer science class. You had to know how to code to be able to create the design and look that you wanted type of thing. Now, with AI, that grunt work is being taken away, and we're focusing on literally the design and how to create moments of attention, how to have people look at it. So we're not designing pages or roles anymore. We're basically designing an experience. And part of that is going from an idea to an app. So since AI tools are now handling the building part, you can focus on the vision. You can turn a rough sketch of an app or a website into a working prototype in hours. And information architecture, called IA, we can think of that as storytelling. Think of the script for the app. Think of the journey you want someone to have on a certain website or a certain application you have type of thing. How you want the user to experience the interaction. You map out a path the user takes. You tell where the eventual goal is type of thing. It's like directing a play or directing an audience's movement through a gallery type of thing. It's that same thing. You're basically charting the course, charting the path that people would take through your website or your app. The other great thing is that you can now design for the senses. It's not just about what you see on the app on the phone. How are we talking to the brand? How it's responding? And then also, what gestures are we using to interact in this digital space? So we're taking a shift from being a graphic designer, which is visuals only, to becoming an experience director, choreographing sight, sound, and touch. And this can be anything from the sounds that the app makes, it can be beeps, or a click sound or whatever, to the gestures being used. Maybe you're not doing a click every time. Maybe it's a pinch. Maybe it's a wave, or just kind of a send left type of thing. It could be all sorts of different things that you can kind of figure out as you're building an app. And then you obviously have to pay attention to the brand DNA. So every button and font must stay true to that. Design never looks messy or off brand. So building in those brand constraints is really important if you're doing UX, UI work. An example of this is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. It was called the Unsupervised Installation by Refik Anadol. And he used basically a AI machine learning model to interpret 200 years of MoMA's internal archives. And he didn't want a static database. He wanted AI to turn the data into a living digital mural that reacts to its environment. And that's what it does. It wasn't just a screen. It's a fluid environment that shifts based on the movement of visitors in the lobby, who's in front of the installation. It even changes based on the weather in Manhattan, based on how warm or cold it was, how much light's coming in. Is it a cloudy day? Is it night? Is it bright sunlight? It did all these things. It's an incredible installation out there that is one example of kind of an interactive media type of thing. Fashion is another kind of cool area of design. I'm going to go into a little bit. And one of the big benefits for fashion is fashion used to work in seasons. You had your spring, you had your summer, your fall, your winter kind of style that you're going on. And now we can go much faster than that. So it's not so much about the seasons, it's about data cycles with AI analysis. So when I say fashion at the speed of data, what we're talking about is having AI literally analyze social media images for early color and silhouette detections. What is hot? What is being worn right now? So that replaces manual trend spotting of people on the streets or looking at magazines and seeing stuff and getting all this data about what people are wearing. It's real-time analysis of millions of data points. So AI can scan platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest to track hashtags, influencer posts, viral aesthetics. You can even have it linked to pop culture events like a viral TV show to see rising style trends. And it can help predict what will resonate in up to 12 to 24 months in advance for fashion. The sketch to garment workflow. Again, imagine if you basically have a hand-drawn idea and then instantly being able to have it scanned in to create a 3D fashion asset of it. There are tools like Style 3D AI that allow designers to move from a mood board or a simple sketch into a technical pattern in a fraction of the time it would take to be able to create manually. So all that's basically incredibly valuable on that one. And we're designing for the senses on that. We're designing about how it looks, how it feels, those types of things. That's a major beneficiation there. And again, much like in the other stuff, we have to have a brand bodyguard. If there's a certain look that needs to be for it, we need to pay attention to that. Fashion has been one of the industries that's been at the forefront of AI use. And here's some examples here from Tommy Hilfiger, Colina Strada, and Moncler. They all have used AI in the past few years type of thing in different ways. Tommy Hilfiger was basically using AI data to experiment with styles and colors. Colina Strada was basically refining the visuals of their archive to basically help create their next collection and then bring them to life. And then Moncler basically was looking at AI to basically create designs to innovate the textures that they use for a lot of their coats and extreme weather gear. How can we go ahead and change stuff? So it's been used a lot. My favorite is Norma Kamali, um, designer for decades. She trained a custom AI model on her 57 years of her brand archives and basically put all the stuff in there and asked the AI, what do you think? What can you come up with? So she has said she believes it rejuvenated her styles by creating fresh ideas that blended into her historical style DNA. What she liked particularly, though, were the hallucinations or glitches that AI came up with. She saw that as avant-garde inspiration rather than mistakes. And one of the examples, as you'll see right there, was her sleeping bag coat, which was a mistake that AI made that she actually made into a full line of coats because she liked it so much. She was quoted as saying, basically, the image is always a surprise. If I say something like, I'd like to put a fishtail on the swimsuit worn with a sleeping bag coat, the AI goes crazy. It's beyond gorgeous in the most art tech fashion way. So she likes this idea that basically it creates all sorts of strange kinds of creativity, which in a lot of ways fashion is about. So I thought a very cool case study there. AI in fashion, not only do we see it as like idea things, but we're also seeing it in things like digital prototyping, allowing designers to visualize concepts perfectly before a single piece of fabric is cut. So you don't need physical prototypes. You're not spending so much on that. And then virtual showrooms. So virtual showrooms basically replacing physical sales floors and sample rooms with really realistic digital environments. Jor is an example. You can see the image there. Their wholesale platform uses 3D imagery to allow retailers to place pre-orders before a single garment is manufactured. So it completely aligns production with demand. There is no wasted space there at all. Very interesting idea. What's the risk versus the benefit when we're talking about fashion? And fashion, like I said, has been an early adopter of AI, and it's in kind of a tug of war right now between how it's being used and whether it's worth the risk. So one of them would be an example of virtual models. So virtual models, again, you can show clothes on all sorts of body types and how it might look on a different body type to give you a better feel of how that jacket, how that shirt, how that dress would look on you. So the risk, however, is there diversity, or is it kind of fake diversity? Are we really actually customizing it in a way that really represents DEI? So I look at it as an example of virtual models can be a supplement, but we're never replacing humans. You always want humans as models on this kind of stuff type of thing. Virtual try-on, which is a big trend in the last couple of years. The 3D body scanning for perfect fit. Sometimes the risk is that fabrics don't necessarily stretch or move or can be conveyed in certain ways with the 3D body scanning. So again, focus on the fit, not faking humanity. So we want to make sure that, we're actually being realistic there. And then conversational bots. There are lots of AI stylists out there that'll build outfits for you. But again, is it true to the brand? Is it drifting off it? Does it hallucinate in some ways? And there needs to be a human in that loop. You just can't have an AI picking clothes for you at some point. At some point, it's just not going to go the right direction. A great example of this risk versus benefit was Levi's in 2023. They had a high-profile partnership with La La Land AI. It's a Dutch fashion studio that used generative AI to create hyper-realistic, body-inclusive avatars, is what they said. And the idea is Levi's wanted to basically, they said supplement, but we also heard the word replace its human models to show its products in a much wider range of body types, ages, and skin tones than traditional photography would allow. And at some point, it makes a little sense because on an e-commerce site, you might only have 1 or 2 models per product. I buy at Banana Republic a fair amount of time. Yeah, there might be 3 or 4 male models and that's it. So the idea of having 50 different avatars to see how a gene fit, there's some benefit to that. The problem is that you're generating fake people of color and fake diversity where you're actually taking work and jobs away. So why not have a multi-billion-dollar company simply hire and pay for more diverse human models than literally go this path of like having fake diversity out there? The result, Levi's was forced to clarify that AI would never replace human models, and the technology was strictly for business efficiency, was what they actually came out of it. It eventually evolved into what I had talked about in a previous slide, that virtual try-on system, where they can mobile scan their body to create digital avatars of themselves that mirror their exact dimensions to show how it will fit. Again, those virtual try-on systems aren't perfect, but they are a start. One of the things about when you're designing is the idea is that you go through a process, and you're basically, instead of spending hours on Pinterest, you are using AI to cast a wider net to ensure your starting point is truly unique. And the first thing you need to do is you need to define. Look at discover first is what it is. My bad. Discover is basically get as much information as possible. So you're not spending all your time on social media. You let AI cast a wide net and give you all your information you can. Then from that, you go into define. And by defining, you would create a brief that basically includes your brand DNA, talks about the goal, the audience, and talks about your point of view and what your aesthetic is. And then you're telling the AI basically, out of everything we found, this is our aesthetic world, this is our brand. Then from that, AI develops all sorts of variations out there as possible. As I've said before, never fall in love with the first output. See what it comes up with. Pick one or two directions based on your strategy and taste and go from there. Then you basically deliver it. You're packaging it. You refine, you test, you launch it, you tighten your constraints. Once you have the final stamp of approval, you hand off the files and provide disclosure credits where appropriate, type of thing. The important thing I will say about this is the define stage is one of the most important stages. You must have a clear vision on your when you're going in this kind of workflow. Have your brief, have your constraints defined, because if you can't explain what you want quickly and clearly, you're not going to get good output. Prompting also, we've always talked about prompting. Prompting matters in this as well. High quality prompting is really going to get you the best technical drawings you need. So to get consistent results, you must categorize your prompts. Start with style and media, and then add the scene. So basically, start the scene, the brand DNA, all that kind of stuff, and then add negative prompts. I'd mentioned in an earlier slide, sometimes I add don'ts, a couple don'ts to basically tell the AI not to do. That helps with error reduction and brand safety. And then from a weighting standpoint, basically, tweak the keyword influence. So instead of saying almost right or you're close, just nudge it up a little bit. So if they have a palette, just say it up the palette 1.2 or 1.3. So just increase the palette. By having that decimal point in there, AI knows that we're just basically nudging a look up or down. It's just a very good way to be precise without having to go through a whole other iteration of something. And that's all for week 7. And hope you enjoyed the lecture.